terms of best practices, one of the things you mentioned was to bake it in rather than lap it as afterthought in the end, right?
Right.
That's one of the things. The second is sort of start with accessibility in mind. It's sort of like the three concentric circles you talked about, the accessibility, design, and then the whole product, right? Is there any other best practices that you have encountered that you would like to share with us in terms of the types of teams, the types of skills, the kinds of tools? Anything else you want to share with the audience in terms of best practices?
Certainly, and just to qualify that, of course, the best practices vary greatly depending on what products we're publishing, what timeline we're on. But when an organization is thrown down that they're excited about this, and most people are, we have some standard plays we recommend. And one of them is counterintuitive. It has to do with which project you start with, because what we find is typically an organization is taking, let's say, an existing website or an existing e-learning library, an existing LMS setup, and saying, okay, let's make it accessible. Well, let me draw you this analogy. Imagine you've got two hospitals, and one hospital has been around for 100 years, and we realize we need to make that hospital accessible. We need to put accessible elevators in and ramps and all kinds of stuff. Well, it's going to be relatively expensive to rip out the old elevators and put new ones in, and because this building wasn't built for accessibility. Now, if you were designing a brand new hospital, it's so much easier if you build in the accessibility from step zero. So if this is your first rodeo, imagine how much easier it is to build accessibility into a new product, a future product that you're developing from scratch, rather than maybe your existing main website. And that way you'll get confident and you'll get the basics down pat. Another version of this we often have organizations that are saying, wow, like we've got 1,000 public facing documents and we need to make them all accessible because someone told us all these PDF files or EPUB files or whatever are not accessible. Well, it may be better to start working internally where you're not public facing, where it's more low risk. So imagine if I were to coach you on how to make your internal email communications more accessible. Meaningful subject lines, not using color in the middle of the body because 10% of your guys in your organization can't find your comments. It takes them 10 times as long to find your comments. You start doing it internally where the risk is lower because you're not worrying about your main audience seeing you do it. And so again, it's counterintuitive, but you start doing it in internal documents. And people tend to focus on the public facing ones because they're the ones that could get them sued. But in order to get your practice going, I actually tend to recommend that we build internally first, and then you're going to feel confident and masterful when you get your certification in accessibility, or you're ready to say, because, and I'll just blather this one more thing, and then I'll pause. It's designers, dev teams, coders, everyone's a little terrified, not just to figure out how to do it, but they're all wondering, did I go far enough? Am I ready to tell the world our website's accessible, our module's accessible? Because you're afraid someone down the street's going to say, wait a moment, you call that accessible? That's not accessible. I'll show you accessible. So getting that confidence level is crucial, and that's why we love international standards like WCAG 2.0, WCAG 2.1. I know this is what you guys preach to your own clients at Harbinger. It gives us a level where we can say, we'll never be perfect at accessibility, just like we'll never publish a website without a typo somewhere. But we have a line that says if we meet or exceed this line, we can confidently say we're part of the solution rather than part of the problem.